Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we're here for another entry into the poetry discussion playlist, a playlist which I hope to have hit 500 videos in the year 2024. The poem in question today comes to us from John Donne, No Man is an Island. But first, before we read the poem, I want to read to you what Harold Bloom says about John Donne. John Donne can seem two poets, the charmed libertine of songs and sonnets and the master of devotional verse. But the same deep and versatile wit profoundly inhabits the ecstasy and the holy sonnets and hymns. And yet, wit, in our current parlance, is a poor term for Donne's gifts. Irony differs from era to era and from writer to writer. John Donne's ironies are close to Shakespeare's in that they focus on meanings rather than exile them. It may be the best to think of Donne's ironical wit as an instrument of discovery, akin to Shakespeare's ironically compassionate invention of personalities. Wit arguably meant intellect, but by the age of Shakespeare, the word had modulated into creative mind or poetic intelligence. We now speak of wit. When we now speak of wit, we tend to think of acute perception or a quickness of apprehension. Donne's wit inspired Ben Jonson to a certain ambivalence, which increased in Alexander Pope and his critical defender, Dr. Samuel Johnson. To this neoclassical tradition, Donnian wit seemed ingenuity, even perverse abuse of metaphor. It is a charming irony that Donne was revived by the Romantics, from Coleridge through Browning and Arthur Symons. The irony is that T.S. Eliot belatedly revived Donne as an Iliadic anti-romantic. In an odd but clear sense, Donne's wit is pragmatic, always seeking a difference that truly will make a difference. There is thus no authentic divide between his libertine and his divine poetry. This allows the achievement of the two astonishing anniversaries. Baroque elegies written in 1610 to memorialize the death of Elizabeth Drury, a girl of high family whom actually Donne had never met. Ben Jonson said that he told Donne that these poems were blasphemous and profane. If it had been written of the Virgin Mary, it may have been something, to which he answered that he described the idea of a woman not as she was, end quote. Why do I want to read that? Number one, because it is necessary to keep in mind when reading this poem, perhaps it is ironic to keep in mind when reading this poem, that John Donne's legacy was revived not once but twice by other poets. By other poets. Remember that. By someone else, really. That's the general idea of here. His legacy was revived by someone else. Number two, that wit and irony of John Donne. The wit and irony in poetry is as much dependent upon things which do not happen in the poem as those things which do, oftentimes at least. If our subject is our love, our sweet baby, but we never mention our sweet baby's looks, that probably says something, doesn't it? It probably tells the reader that we are not with our sweet baby for her looks, but there is something else that she offers. Now, the poem in question reads as such. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. So why is it necessary to know that John Donne was resurrected by poets? Poets are his nation. Poets are the great landmass, the great Europe, we could say, to which John Donne belongs. They are unwilling, poets, to let that clod of dirt, the clod of dirt which is John Donne, to wash away. That is a beautiful irony to this poem. But here is another irony about this poem that deserves to be discussed, one that is not mentioned in the poem. If, pardon me, if every man that dies weakens me, does this also not state, not imply, not mean, does this not mean that every man who is alive strengthens me, that I am stronger for every one that is? Certainly, that inverse property does exist. So we have here from Donne a poem that is very much about no one being an island, meaning that no one's life is lived in isolation. Everything we do affects those around us. Everything we do has meaning, not just for ourselves, but for someone else. Even the things that we think are meaningless mean something to someone else. They affect the life of someone else. This poetry, living in this way, is exemplary of that fact. The fact that Donne is resurrected time and again by poets is because of the little things like this that he does. And it is ironic that he is so often resurrected by other poets, because he is saying, any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sinned to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. The idea that no man is an island, the idea that no one has gotten... So this is a very strange turn to the poem. No man is an island entire of itself. This seems to be something which is arguing no one is self-made. But when we get to the end of the poem, it's arguing that no one is self-undone. It is arguing that your undoing, my undoing, anyone's undoing, has the greater undoing in mind, has the greater undoing in effect. And so these beautiful ironies that Harold Bloom tells us about within the pages of Donne, these things that John Donne, the things that John Donne is able to do on the page and turn the reader against himself, is one of the best tools that Donne has. No one is an island entirely of itself. This is a hopeful message. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here on the channel, hitting the like button helps me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more literary videos. There's poetry on the channel every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.